when I say the word blue wall, I would expect people to picture in their minds, well, probably first, maybe a blue wall, but of course, politically thinking, of course, you would tend to imagine the very safe Tory seats, probably down south, maybe in the Midlands, just maybe sort of east, northeast sort of size of London. So, in that sort of general area, that is where most people would picture the typical, or at least the archetypical Tory blue seat. And that is what a lot of people are looking at. What is going to happen to those seats at the next general election? However, the reality is there is a northern blue wall, because up north, up mostly in and around York, which is where all the posh people of Yorkshire live. I'm sure they won't mind me saying that. But in and around York is where all the posh people in Yorkshire live. That has been for many, many years also a stronghold of Tories that have existed there for quite some time in a sea of red. And they have managed to maintain this almost fortress-like hold on those seats in the north. But we don't often hear about those northern blue wall seats. We always hear about the southern blue wall seats. So today we're going to go over this article because it goes over just one such seat. Because we don't hear enough about these northern blue wall seats, where we get a lot of attention around the southern blue wall seats. So I think it is worth going over just what questions these northern blue wall Tory voters, or at least those voters up there, are thinking when it comes to the next general election. Because we've heard a lot about the South, but not about those guys. So I think we need to go over and cover them. But they are having very similar questions about their loyalty and their choices at the upcoming not only by-election that's happening, but especially coming up to the next general election. So before we go diving into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is, of course, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club as well. So let's go over today to The Guardian to have a look at this. The title of Anyone But Tory. Blue Wall, Yorkshire Village questions loyalty ahead of by-election. The wealthy village of Bolton Percy is a tiny North Yorkshire elderly with only one bus, the number 27, which comes every 2 hours, and where the post office is only open once a week during a 4-hour window on a Wednesday. It is a place where residents have neat gardens and fancy cars and a friendly local church, which will celebrate its 600th birthday next year. And it is the social hub. In other words, it is exactly the kind of place the Tories could normally rely on for an abundance of support. After the Selby and Ainsty MP Nigel Adams, a Boris Johnson ally, has resigned over the weekend after being snubbed for a peerage, a by-election was triggered. It should be cut and dry. Since the constituency was created back in 2010, it has been solidly Conservatives, and Adams has a 60% of the vote in 2019, and a proportion of that increased with every general election, raising even during the 2017 election, where the Tory vote share had dropped in most English constituencies. But on a hot sunny Monday, it was clear that something had changed. Residents spoke in hushed tones about abandoning the Tories, keen to air their views but unwilling to be named or pictured for fear of those views being exposed to their neighbours. As we said, everything we're hearing about this Northern Blue Wall seat, almost exactly the similar tones as what we're hearing down south. This isn't good. This is not a good sign for Rishi Sunak at all. But we had this one resident say this. I have been a Conservative voter, but not over the last few years. I've said a retired man outside his cottage with a garden of pink roses welcoming the buzzing bumblebees. He said, I'm frightened at the state of the country. The cabinet have no principles. It's a complete clown show. And that's before you even get into the question of integrity. They're squabbling like rats in a sack. Johnson, a nasty piece of work, had caused damage to the country that will take a lifetime to undo if it can ever be undone. And Adams was fully implicating one of Boris's bag carriers. A lot of people might vote Labour as a protest vote about how disgusted they are at the moment, he said. And a neighbour who lived in a grandstone house just down the winding country lane said what people wanted was a caring conservatism, which they were not seeing much under the amateurish Tory cabinet. Ouch. Ouch. And remember, this potentially was meant to be one of the safe seats Rishi Sunak could rely on. And yet, this is the language coming from its residents, its voters. If this is what's happening here, then what about those other blue wall northern seats? Again, we don't tend to hear much about them because everyone sort of really tends to focus on the southern blue wall. But that northern blue wall might not be as high as the southern blue wall, but the southern one has resisted, think of it as a castle. It's resisted siege after siege after siege. But now the people in the castle are like, I think we should just open the gates. And that is not good for Rishi Sunak, where we know the Tories' idea of the next general election is going to be to try and survive as best as they can, to lose, but lose as best as they can, not badly, is the best way to sum it up. But anyway, we'll continue. There is a cancer there that's working against good government, he said. They are utterly obsessed with celebrity rather than the issues. The economy is in a bad way. We're hanging on by our fingernails, and I'd like to see politicians dealing with it. He thought about Keir Starmer's Labour looks like a government in waiting, adding, they're bright people, not stupid. They bring a degree of serious thought, and they're more thoughtful and measured. So how would he be voting? Having voted Tory all my life, anyone but Tory, he said. It is amazing how you can shift from being true blue, but I don't think I've changed. It's this immature government with populist leaders. It was a message that local Labour organisers on Doorstep had seized upon the scorching afternoon in Selby, briefing the door knockers to remind the voters that Adam was mates with Boris. In lieu of a candidate at the moment, the Labour selection will happen on Thursday, where they were going to be joined by West Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, who said unapologetically that they had been stringent about vetting. So this was to weed out any candidate who were, quote, too left-wing. We have to be pretty clear about the change we're making in order to get people back. And there will be some people further to the left who will say, well, I'm sorry, but I don't want that compromise. But unfortunately, that is the only way Labour wins this general election. What have I been saying? In politics, for every time I've said it, you have to compromise. And unfortunately, there are people on the left who can who would rather Labour just went on to lose this next general election than actually win and actually deliver something. Because I've said this now, you could have a Labour government and someone as a left winger, they might deliver about 30% of what I want. Which, to be honest, is not nothing. That's good. I'd be pretty enthusiastic about the gains we could win and the gains we could make from that. But if we lose and the Tories sneak in again, we get nothing. So we on the left have to learn to compromise. I don't 100% like Keir Starmer. But I am far, far more willing to want him to win than a potential Tory, or at least have another Rishi Sunak term. And that is unfortunately what a lot of people on the left cannot seem to do. They cannot seem to compromise. And in politics, you have to compromise. Even if we changed our voting system over to PR, people on the left would have to learn to compromise. You cannot get everything you want in politics. Sometimes you get 50%. Sometimes you get 30%. But that is better than the alternative of allowing the Tories in again and getting absolutely nothing. So this is palpable that despite a loss for the Conservatives, this will be a hard seat to win for Labour. And Streeting focusing on the rising mortgage rates when he's speaking to voters. It's a good call in a place where nearly 3/4 of people own their own home. More than 1/4 of people in the Selby Council District are a retired age, and it's creeping up as youngsters are increasingly deserting their town for nearby York or Leeds. A boundary review will see a split at next year's general election, with the posh villages of the Bolton Percy annexed, making the seat considerably more winnable for Labour. It was clear that their eyes were on the general election. It is all to play for, Streeting said, and Labour were all smiles in their working class heartland with a steadfast support on the doors, and the only moment of unease came when a little boy with a ward pistol pointed it threateningly at the shadow cabinet minister's crotch. But to Streeting's relief, he turned his weapon on the Guardian's photographer instead. Okay, that's kind of funny. You can see. Yeah, we don't hear a lot about these seats. We do not hear a lot about these blue wall northern strongholds that have been there, especially around York and Harrogate. Those tend to be sort of that little blue wall that sort of resist and have been sort of these blue outposts in a sea of red. They've managed to resist for quite some time, but we don't hear about this. And if these go, this will be just as big a shock for Sunak as he will at losing losing the southern blue wall seats as well. So it's good that we actually get to hear about these northern blue wall seats, because we haven't heard about a lot of these northern blue wall seats before. So that is something we haven't heard before. So I thought this would be interesting to sort of bring you, and especially bringing the views of what some of these people think, because some of that is what we have been consistently hearing whenever we've covered stuff from the blue wall, whenever they've interviewed people in the blue wall. What do you think about the Conservatives? Will you be voting for the next general election? No, I won't be voting for them. No, I think they're completely incompetent. They're too populist for me. Yeah. The next general election is going to be very interesting, and especially this by-election. Maybe Labour won't win it. Maybe they won't this time. But it will be interesting to see by how much the 60% lead gets cut down to. Because there's going to be a lot of Tory MPs who are in other seats going, oh, wow, that was cut down by, what, 40%? I've lost my seat. Because maybe you only have a 20% lead or 30%. That's going to cause a lot of problems. Even if the Tories win, any significant reduction is going to send a it's going to completely set, a cat amongst the pigeons amongst other Tories, worrying. If that election happened in my constituency, I would lose my seat because it's been cut by 30%. That is my majority, or that is more than my current majority. So, yeah, interesting times. Interesting times ahead, certainly. And at first time we've actually heard about these blue wall seats, these northern blue wall seats, of course. So that's nice to hear that it's not just the south blue wall that is considering ditching the Tories, but these northern blue wall seats as well. So we'll see what happens, of course. But I expect maybe the Conservatives maybe to hold on to that one. Maybe just to hold on to that one, but we'll see what happens. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.